So I've always been pretty creative. So I mean, I even remember as a kid coming up with an idea to do XYZ. And Dry and Stride actually took about 8 years from when I thought of the idea to actually getting brave enough to get a product to market. And there was a lot of reasons for that. One, you've got to research. Two, find vendors. Again, all these things that you don't even know you need to do. We did apply for a patent because this is a little bit unique, and I wanted to make sure we had some of that groundwork done before we launched. But really, I mean, there's financing, there's funding, there's volumes. As much as I would love to say I have 500,000 towels ready to go, I am not a at that level yet. So thankfully this journey has been as big or as small as I've been able to take it at each given time. It wasn't, I never had to do it. I chose to do it. And I think that's really helped my comfort level, my passion, and my engagement because I want to do it. I don't have to do it. So I think there's just kind of a little bit of a break there.
Welcome to another episode of Everything Intellectual Property. Today, we have a very special guest with us. This person has created a hands-free retractable towel that can be used in various activities, whether you're exercising or otherwise. Please help me welcome the CEO and the founder of Dry and Stride, Sara Slettebo. How is it going, Sara?
Thank you so much, Dave, and perfect enunciation with the name. That's kind of can be a confusing or a question mark for a lot of people, but you nailed it. So
No,
glad to be here, and thank you so much.
no worries. I'm glad to have you this morning. And I'm not sure if you kind of checked out the background. The jersey, I played football at Michigan State back in college, and I had a teammate whose last name was called Setterbo. So
Okay.
it kind of brought me back when I was kind of reading your last name. It kind of brought me back. It's kind of similar, Setterbo. So I'm like, okay, I had practiced pronouncing this name for 4 years, whatever, when I was on the football team. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's kind of it was kind of right on right on time as far as kind of me having practiced that over the years.
Yes, I actually think there's a player right now whose last name is Sketterbo as well. So
Yep,
I
for
think
Arizona, I
but
think Arizona
yes,
State.
I think so.
Nice, nice. So I guess what I typically in terms of like at the beginning to do to the extent that again somebody's watching it on audio, if you can kind of describe the product just so they can kind of get an idea of what it is that you've created or invented.
Of course. Thank you. So I invented a hands-free towel. It's about the size of the washcloth. One is a little bit larger than a washcloth. One is a little bit smaller. And there's a snap in the middle of it that's connected to a retractable clip. So you can put it on a waistband. You can put it on a backpack, like a hiking backpack, or even a stroller or a baby changing, a baby bag. So you have a towel when you need it without actually having to, carry it, which is kind of traditionally how all the towels work right now. So you have to put it in your hands, shove it in your waistband or in your pocket and hope it doesn't fall out. And that's just not really convenient if you need to use it on a, sort of regular basis, like exercise.
Absolutely, and hopefully, I guess I kind of pulled up the website here so that people can kind of see the towel. If they're watching it on video, you see it. I think this is you here where you have it on your hip there, and then I think again you walking with a friend or maybe family member that you have it on your hip as well. So hopefully, kind of along with your description, they can see that kind of picture if they're following along through video. And no, this is cool, and I actually love the name Dry and Stride as well. And I think I was maybe preparing for this interview. It seems like you initially kind of came up with this through exercising, but kind of through maybe kind of selling things and kind of feedback from the customers. It has kind of applicability to more than just maybe exercising. Is that correct?
That is correct. I did it because I was on a jog and I wanted a towel that I didn't have to carry. But it seems like whenever anybody hears about it or gets one, they give me one more reason on another way or another application that it can be used. And it's been in the kitchen, it's been high school band practices, it's been I'm taking it to Disney. So if you can think of just a very, any kind of daily activity where you might either be touching, or near water or sweating, there seems to be an application. So it's just funny watching our customers help show us other avenues that you can use this.
No, no, exactly, exactly. And again, you talked about the inspiration of kind of you coming up with the product based on you exercising. And again, I've been there where I was at the gym the other day, and it's like, okay, have if I have sweat, then I'm kind of using my shirt and my sleeve to kind of wipe off the sweat that's kind of on my face. But this is a kind of a different way to do that using something that is seems like it's convenient, because obviously when you're running, you don't want to have to hold a towel and different things so that you can kind of wipe yourself off. But being able to have this kind of clip and towel on you, it seems like it's kind of perfect for that. Let me ask you this: what were you doing before? I guess dry and stride, because I'm always interested. A lot of times, such as yourself, people are kind of creating or solving a problem that they are facing or that someone else is facing. The next thing you know, they have a product, but typically they don't necessarily have expertise in that thing that they're going into, whether they are an attorney or maybe a nurse. The next thing you know, they have a business kind of dealing with something completely different. What were you doing before dry and stride?
Government contracting,
Okay.
very consulting, I guess, if you will, trying to help improve things. So, yes, this was sort of on accident. It was about 8 years in the making, and having a mindset of services, and running a business before. So at least I'm familiar with that aspect. But services and soft products is very, very different than physical products. So even though I have some business acumen, it's really on a different level for a product based item, which dry and stride is.
Right, right. And so let me ask you this: how kind of was that? It seems like you're doing government contracting, which is, for me, from a novice standpoint, it seems like that's completely different from, like you said, the product with dry and stride. Uh, were you hesitant to maybe kind of go into business or create a product and go into business, or was it something like, okay, it seems like everybody secretly has at some point wants to be an entrepreneur, kind of come out with a product. Was this something that you maybe had plans on maybe back in the day, although maybe not so much with dry and stride, or was this something that kind of completely came out of nowhere and you're like, okay, I'm going to take it and run with it?
So I've always been pretty creative. So I mean, I even remember as a kid coming up with an idea to do XYZ. And dry and stride actually took about 8 years from when I thought of the idea to actually getting brave enough to get a product to market. And there was a lot of reasons for that. One, you've got to research. Two, find vendors. Again, all these things that you don't even know you need to do. We did apply for a patent because this is a little bit unique, and I wanted to make sure we had some of that groundwork done before we launched. But really, I mean, there's financing, there's funding, there's volumes. As much as I would love to say I have 500,000 towels ready to go, I am not a at that level yet. So thankfully this journey has been as big or as small as I've been able to take it at each given time. It wasn't, I never had to do it. I chose to do it. And I think that's really helped my comfort level, my passion, and my engagement, because I want to do it. I don't have to do it. So I think there's just kind of a little bit of a break there.
And let me ask you this, because I love what you said, and I think especially these days with the D2C, direct to consumer, you don't have to worry about kind of having to get into a big box retailer, whether that's Sam's Club or Costco, or have to have all these orders up front. You can kind of, like you said, kind of go as you or sell as you go, so to speak, with the direct to consumer. Can you talk a little bit? Because again, I'm maybe biased being an IP attorney, but I'm always of the mindset that everybody should at some point kind of come up with something, or maybe come out with something from an entrepreneurship standpoint, or even, and that's even if they maybe are kind of uh, have somebody else kind of run the day-to-day operations of the business, especially with having D2C. Can you kind of talk about them? I guess the benefit of being able to go direct to consumer and sell this thing on maybe an e-commerce platform such as Amazon, or even your own website, as opposed to having to kind of deal with the big box retailer.
Yes. So I think the two big things is, one, again, the scale, right? I don't need 500,000 units right now. I can sort of get them as needed. And it also allows me to adjust the product, right? If one size is selling out more than another, then I'm not going to end up with excess stock that's going to be at a bargain bin somewhere. So I think one, that's one big thing. But two, I think being smaller and going the direct to consumer route right now allows me the opportunity to listen. Is this the right product for everybody? I mean, products, no matter what they say, are always being validated out in the marketplace. So I have a lot of, I have a big hurdle ahead of me because I'm not in all of those box stores today. But every piece of feedback I get from someone either helps me with marketing, helps me with tailoring the product, helps me with coming up with adding new colors, all of those things I think still make this a personal touch product versus again, a product where there's 300,000 of them out there and it's just one more thing.
I like that. Yeah, I definitely like that. And then, yeah, just being able to kind of adapt and pivot. I think you were saying, especially again, when you order 500,000, then like you said, you have to sell 500,000. Whereas if you kind of are kind of selling as you go, and based on the feedback from the customers, you can kind of maybe get more of these particular items or kind of change things up kind of as you go. Which is like the great with the direct to consumer approach. And as you put it, the market is ultimately going to validate the product. So you can think you have this great product, but ultimately the market is going to decide whether or not you have a winner or maybe a not winner. Let me ask you this, because kind of being IP and me kind of being an IP attorney, you talked about having a patent. Did you know about patents or not? I don't want to necessarily say just patents, but intellectual property early on, whether it was trademarks, whether it was patents. Did you know about that early on, or did you did you learn going through this process?
I knew of trademarks because the consulting business had a trademark on the name. So I was aware of that. I was vaguely aware of that there are things called a patent, but I certainly did not know that there's two different kinds of patents. There's the provisional patent, but then you also have design, you have utility. Um, I knew vaguely how to search for patents. Again, because I had to search for trademarks in the past. So I was aware conceptually of sort of how to do it.
Yep.
But and this is why you need lawyers and why you need attorneys for all of this. It's a very nuanced, platform. You're not going to, for if you take like a phone, for an example, if you have the best, coolest widget there is, you're not going to name your patent best, coolest widget because you don't want anybody else to find it.
Yep.
So even some of those things are how do you find, the components of a patent, even if it's done in a completely different way to make sure you are, one, patenting the right thing, but two, also making sure that you're not going through that process only to find that something out already exists. So it's been very, very eye-opening. And it actually took me 3 attorneys till I found one that I felt was listening and could give me answers that I felt were useful to me. And that was really shocking as well.
And I have to kind of dig deeper on that, because one of the things I find interesting, man, being an IP attorney, being a patent attorney, I always thought that, man, obviously you have good and bad of everything out there, good and bad cops, good and bad attorneys, good and bad doctors, whatever the case may be. But I've always blown away by, especially from a startup perspective, how many people kind of run into maybe not so good attorneys or attorneys that they can relate to early on. So hearing you say, hey, I have to go through 3 attorneys before I found my one is always interesting to me. And I have to ask, what was the reasoning for that? I know you said that they weren't listening. Was it anything specific, or I guess can you dig a little deeper on that, or come to explain that a little more?
Of course. So the first attorney firm that I reached out to was actually recommended to me. So I was like, great. They work with small businesses. I understand that I am not an expert in any of this. I am barely over, a child level as far as understanding goes. And so when I was explaining the product, explaining the concept, the person you could just tell they weren't interested.
Really?
Here, I mean, from an attorney perspective, if someone has an idea, they're already open to the fact that they're going to have to spend money on it. Right now, again, how many zeros remains to be seen, but there is a cost involved with that. So I'm basically going to this attorney knowing I'm going to be spending money, and I'm looking for help. I'm asking questions, what do you think about this? On my product, what is actually patentable, right?
Okay.
Because really it's a towel, which already exists in the marketplace, and it's a clip that already exists in the marketplace. So can my product even be patentable? And if so, explain how it works. And so the first attorney, really, I was an inconvenience. And I just was thinking to myself that if I'm, again, going to spend money, and time to do this, I want someone who will at least listen. The second company that I spoke with was more into almost like, I think, a very technical kind of utility patents. And this was a design patent. So not a good fit. And again, that's going to happen. And then the third attorney, the one that I ended up going with, actually let me probably talk to him 4 times before we even started the drawings, for what this ended up becoming, because I do like to ask a lot of questions. And so, one thing I learned, and again, I love learning, was that if you are the first person with a patent, you kind of get a lot of extras because you're not patenting something that's different. You're patenting something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so for my attorney to sort of explain that to me, because I'm thinking, well, what if my towel goes from square to rectangle? Is my patent now, do I have to patent that? If my clip changes slightly, do I have to repatent and refile? And so for him to be able to explain how I'm protected, where those boundaries are along the way, were great. He also said, you're more than likely going to be rejected, and it's not you. It's just sort of, the nature of the beast. So he listened. He was very thorough, and I was comfortable knowing that, in my opinion, I was getting the best support I could for what I was looking for.
No, yeah, and again, I couldn't agree with you more on everything that you just said. A lot of times, particularly with startups or kind of people who are going through it the first time, just having a good line of communication is important, and really explaining to them the process. I had maybe a client that I was talking to a couple of days ago who's a startup company, and they were looking at abandoning their utility patent because they got rejected. And they're like, hey man, like your turning point. This is just the nature of the beast. A lot of times it takes maybe 2 or 3 go arounds before you get something allowed. You're rarely going to get something allowed the first go around, even though I've had things allowed the first go around. It typically, especially if you're trying to get something of value, it's going to take a couple kind of go arounds before kind of you guys settle on something between you and the United States Patent and Trademark Office that that is allowable. And like you said, being able to take that time and explain that to the client, it seems like it's an important, especially when they're kind of really don't know the process. So no, everything that you just said, I couldn't agree with more. So it seems like you're saying, and there's actually 3 types of patents. You have the design patent, you have the utility patent, and then you have something what is called a plant patent, which is not kind of a thing that people talk about a whole lot. And to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of experience with plant patents, but it's like if you grow some type of plant or whatnot that's produced, I think it's asexually produced, then you can get a patent on that kind of plant, which is the third form of patent. Like I said, definitely utility and design are maybe the more popular ones. But a patent patent is definitely something that's out there. So it seems like in your case, you have a design patent. Is that correct?
That is correct. And
Right.
just to follow back, and I apologize for interrupting you, Dave. One of the funny things that I saw when we got rejected, because we were rejected twice before we were approved,
See?
was that the examiner actually told us why we were rejected and almost gave us the answer on how to get beyond that particular rejection. I mean, one of them was very, very, very ticky tack, which again, attorneys, you have to be that way. It was, in one scenario, we used the word I, in one scenario, we used the word we. So you needed to make them the same, whichever you wanted them to be. They just needed to be consistent. But then, I mean, there was another one. It was like, this is wrong because of this. But here's an example of a picture on how you can do what you're trying to say correctly. So they almost even gave us the answers, which I was very happy. I don't know if every examiner does that, but I was very thankful that ours helped along the way.
And I'm extremely glad that you brought that up. And a lot of people don't know because you think of attorneys, you think of court, you think of adversarial. Really, the process between us and the United States Patent and Trademark Office is not meant to be an adversarial process. It's not a them versus us thing. It's us kind of working. Really, it's supposed to be us working together to get something that we believe is novel and non-obvious, is different from what's out there. That's kind of really the goal between the United States Patent and Trademark Office and those who file for patent applications. And I've had examiners who, to your point, they understand that process and they're looking to work with us, whether it's on the utility side or design side. Hey, what you have is, probably not patentable for X, Y, and Z reasons, but if you kind of modify it to this or that, that will overcome the art, and that's something that I can allow. That's kind of really what you want, because that's somebody who understands the process of, hey, this is what this whole kind of back and forth is all about. But some examiners don't get it, and they kind of treat it as an adversarial kind of process, unfortunately, because it's really not meant to be that. It's more so us working together with the examiners at the USPTO to kind of come to a meeting of the mind, so to speak, on what we believe is kind of new and unobvious based on what's out there. So I'm very glad that you brought that up, because that's how it's really supposed to go. And a lot of examiners kind of miss that mark a lot of the times.
Yes, if you figure that your patent, when it's issued, just like a trademark, it's a protection mechanism. So if it is not 100% lock solid, you are not going to be protected. So to your point, yes, we are trying to work together to make sure that you have the best
Yep.
position you can with that patent or trademark, or whatever it may be coming out of the patent and trademark office. But it was something, again, I didn't know, and so to see it as somebody with a submission, it was disheartening a little bit, because you never want to be rejected, but at the same time, knowing that that piece of paper exists now, and it will forever be mine, is really kind of neat too.
No, for sure. No, I agree with you 100%. And this is interesting because, again, you have a product that is not necessarily uh, just applicable here in the US, but kind of really across the globe, whether because everybody's exercising or kind of performing some tasks where they may be sweating, and that's kind of very true, especially if you want kind of warmer climates. And again, a US patent, whether it's a design or a utility patent, just protects you here in the US. But have you kind of thought about maybe protection abroad, especially since it seems like your product has applicability in different countries, not just the US?
I have, and the only thing that I'm hesitant to do it at this point, because again, I'm just not at the scale yet, right? Again, that's also going to cost money and experts, and while maybe a European patent equivalent would make sense, the realities, even if you were to get certain Asian patents, I'm not going to name the countries necessarily, but they don't hold water, and this is not a complicated gadget. It's very, kind of simple to put together. I was able to do prototypes just going to my general store, back several years ago. So I don't know, even if I extended it beyond our borders, if I would have the money to enforce any of those people afterwards. So it's kind of one of those catch 22s, but if I make it to that maybe next step, then who knows?
No, and again, you're dropping some jewels now, which just kind of me expounding on a little bit more. That is a good point. A lot of people maybe don't understand where obviously you want to have something that's simple. A lot of times, the stuff that's going to sell is typically the things that are simple and not complicated to use. But again, if you have something that's extremely simple, unfortunately, it's easy to maybe be kind of, I guess, copy, for the lack of a better word. Whereas if something is a little bit more complicated or takes modes and things like that, not saying it's not going to be copied, but it just kind of takes a little bit more effort and work to copy that product. So I kind of see your point in terms of, hey, yeah, I can kind of spend the money to protect it in these different countries, but given the simplicity of the product, if kind of people are kind of copying it left and right, am I really going to look to enforce it in those different countries? And again, a lot of times that's a business decision. But I always ask it just because a lot of people don't understand. I have a lot of Shark Tank guests that I interview. And we were talking about, and a few of the Shark Tank guests, they didn't understand kind of the timing of it all, where a lot of this intellectual property, particularly with patents, it have time constraints that a lot of people unfortunately don't know about. So you can get a patent here in the US, and you have a lot of times a certain time period to protect it abroad, and a lot of people miss that, even though they kind of develop a market abroad and now they can't protect it, and a lot of copycats kind of pop up abroad, and they're like, hey, why can't I enforce it or whatnot? So a lot of people just don't know that, again, it's kind of time constraints to this stuff. And to the extent that you want to protect it abroad, you have to kind of look to get IP protection abroad. So I always kind of ask that question, especially when it's something that is not not kind of US specific, but it has applicability in different countries as well.
And that makes sense. And I mean, I'm certainly no expert, but there has to be dozens of international patent offices. Again, it's not like there's just one for Europe. I mean, there might be maybe one for the EU that might cover a few countries, but again, if you go to South America, it's not like there's a South America patent office. So even then, that cost benefit is, how many countries are you going to try to do your patents, do them, and then maybe the ones that are more recognizable to either be able to manufacture your product or sell your product, but you're still not going to probably hit every country.
Oh, for sure. And that's maybe necessarily shouldn't be the goal, especially as a startup company. Again, you bring up a good point just from a business standpoint. Okay, maybe you want to protect it in your biggest markets. A lot of times the US is going to be a big market. Then sometimes you kind of protect it in company, and to the extent that the product justifies it in countries that you're manufacturing it. And a lot of times that may be China or Taiwan or whatever the case may be, Philippines or whatnot. But then to your point with the EU, I know a lot of times you can get a European patent which kind of protects all the members of I think the European Union. So you can go into each country individually, but you can also get something like a European patent that kind of protects the product in a number of patents, in a number of countries. So there's different ways to go about it. Like you said, a lot of times it's just a business decision on where you're selling the most of, or what countries you're selling the most in, as well as maybe manufacturing to the extent that that applies for your product. Let me ask you this, because I remember this had to be a year or so ago now, and it's cool being able to interview a lot of guests. It was her, Julie, I forget her last name offhand. She's from Texas. She invented something called the wrist water bottle, and it was Swiggies, and
Yes.
it was a similar product where if you're running, and I think she had painted on her jog, and she came up with this wrist water bottle to the point where now hands-free, you can kind of, it seems like Julie, which is cool. But
I was recently introduced to her. Yes.
nice, nice. So I interviewed her a year or so ago, and she talked a lot about. Okay, she had, I think, the utility patent maybe, or utility door design. I can't think of one offhand, but she also talked about the trade dress being really the 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 holy grail, so to speak, of IP protection, and particularly with her product. And a lot of people don't know about trade dress, but it's very similar to design patents in that it protects the ornamental feature or look and feel of the product. But unlike design patents, which only last 15 years, trade dress being a subset of trademark lasts forever as long as you're using it. And to the extent that you can say that or show that it's distinctive and people kind of know that product to be associated with your company, she was able to get trade dress protection on her Swiggy's water bottle, and that gives her uh, more or less lifetime protection to the extent that she's using it. So is that something that you've thought about? I always like to bring that up when people have design patents or protect the design of the product.
I have heard of trade dress. I think I might have gone briefly, like put my fingers in the rabbit hole, but I have not gone very far into it.
Okay.
I think I would have to see, since mine is not just all fabric based, how that trade dress would apply.
Yeah.
But that certainly seems like something else to again add to the arsenal, right? I mean, in this world of intellectual property, I mean, even getting your name trademarked, that did not seem important. But now it's like, wait a minute. Yes, because, if things happen, you want that protected. Oh, well, then you also need your logo and you need this. So, I mean, is a plethora of items that you can protect.
Sure.
But trade dress is not one that I have really looked into yet, but I will put it on my list of ones to check out.
No, for sure. And again, trade dress is very similar to design. A design patent is maybe looked at a little bit more stringent just because, again, the design patent lasts for a finite amount of time, whereas trade dress, again, it covers the same ornamental look and feel of it, but it lasts forever. So I guess the examination process is a little bit more strenuous, given that it lasts forever. So that's definitely something that I always like to kind of put forth, especially when somebody has something that they're protecting via a design patent. So yeah, no, definitely put that on your list. I guess I always like to ask the guests this. I know, again, you're starting out with the business and whatnot. But again, you've been at it for some time. I think you said 6 or 8 years. Uh, I have a kind of a two-part question. Number one, what was probably the biggest breakthrough that you've had with the business up until this point in time? And then on the other side of things, what was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
All right. So we've been in market. We actually are hitting our 3-year mark in a couple of weeks, which is really exciting since we actually officially launched. But yes, the idea has been 6 or 8 years. So the biggest hurdle right now, I'm going to do the second question part of first, is awareness, right? I do not have a multi-million-dollar advertising budget. So being strategic, and we are predominantly right now direct to consumer. So,
Okay.
Finding creative ways to get the brand out there to improve recognition, right? Because all of that, again, will help scale us as we grow. So I think that's been the biggest challenge because, again, I'm not a marketing expert. So I've tried a lot of things. They're certainly not great, but does a Facebook ad versus an Amazon ad versus a radio ad versus a commercial, like, again, where is that cost benefit? Where's that sweet spot? And so it's just a lot of trying and exploration till we find things that work. So that's the next challenge. I think the biggest surprise is, again, just the feedback from people on the next way. My friend, I know someone that bought it, and she's like, I bought one for my friend who works works as a bartender. She's like, she always needs something for her hands. And again, I'm thinking, I did it because I was running and I was sweating and it was gross. But here's someone, who got it. Actually, she got it for pickleball. And she's like, but my friend who's a bartender who's inside an air conditioning, it's perfect for her. So I think that's really been the biggest surprise is the number of other ways and the value that they see on, again, it's a towel. It's not, the new phones back in the day when the new iPhones first came out and you could talk and text and do the internet all at the same time. I mean, that was just amazing at the time. I mean, this is a towel,
Yep.
but the people are getting excited and they're finding more ways to use them in their life is really what's been just most interesting.
And again, I have to say, one of the things I love about entrepreneurship, one of the things I love about IP is you don't have to have the next iPhone or rocket ship that you're inventing. A lot of times, what they say, kids keep it simple. If it's a simple product, yet it's kind of solves a problem and it's effective in a marketplace, a lot of times that could be a winner. So, like again, to your point, even though, like I said, maybe it's not the next iPhone or whatever the case may be, if people, if the market decides that this thing has value, is effective and solves problems, then it would gravitate towards it, and you can kind of sell a lot of product, even though it's not, kind of the next iPhone or whatever the case may be. So that's kind of something that I love about kind of the whole IP and entrepreneurship. Another thing that you talked about is kind of the market deciding what's the best way to use it. So a lot of times you can have one way to use it, which again, people still use it in that way. But as you get feedback from customers and they kind of find new uses, whether it's pickleball, whether it's bartending, in different forms, that's kind of different from the original use in your case, exercising or maybe running. So that's another thing that I love about IP and entrepreneurship is that again, it can cover a lot of things outside of the original use of it. I guess going to the challenge with the whole kind of marketing and kind of getting it out there. Now, I have to. I'm saying this, but I kind of have to take my own kind of words of my advice as well. As far as I was at the Shark Tank reunion conference in Tampa, Florida, maybe about a month or so ago, and a lot of it's really exclusively for kind of past Shark Tank guests, and I was kind of serving as the kind of exclusive podcast there. And one of the things that I found interesting just sitting in on the different sessions is how important e-commerce platforms is, or just kind of social media marketing, particularly say TikTok. Now, again, I'm not on TikTok myself, and I'm trying to kind of not get ADHD or whatever the case may be by being on there and just kind of scrolling. But it seems like that's been extremely useful for different, at least Shark Tank guests who've kind of been able to go on and sell a ton of product and get a lot of eyeballs surrounding their product, kind of being on TikTok and kind of creating videos and things like that. Is that something that maybe you kind of talked about as a way to kind of get it out there without having to spend a ton of money on marketing and advertising, but more so organic views and building an organic audience?
So we recently just got on TikTok a couple of months ago, actually. So again, before all of this, I was in government contracting. There's some tension, TikTok went down for a little while earlier this year. So there's been some hesitation on my end just because of understanding some of those back end components. But
Yeah.
I do work with someone who helps us a little bit with our social media. And it was really encouraged that we get on TikTok. So we're on. We're not on very much. I'm still thinking about even doing like a TikTok shop. And I was actually just told, I think it was last week, that there are people that have TikTok shops with other products on them. And so I was like, oh, I did not know that because I also am not a doom scroller on TikTok. I use some of the other platforms a little bit more, but I haven't had, I haven't gone to go research where those people might be. We do like ambassador programs, some user generated content, some things like that, but we haven't found the viral yet. We haven't gone viral, which is again okay for me today. Because if somebody were to say, if you had to go process 2,000 orders in a week, could you do it? Yes, I could. Would I want to? Probably not today.
Right.
But, I mean, again, that's, you want to get there, right? You want to get there. But I also know from past experience that when we do our next level up, it's going to hurt, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you grow is by kind of adding that next zero, adding that next employee, adding that next something. And that really kind of catapults you to the next level. And I think we're close. And I'm hoping by the end of the year, we've made that next, achievement.
No, and I definitely agree with that. And a lot of times it seems like just that kind of next step or that next growth can be uncomfortable. I forget the saying, but it's something like, hey man, if it's right when things get uncomfortable, that's kind of like you're at that kind of precipice or that ceiling where you're about to hit the next level, which it's unfortunate how that works where you're growing, but it's uncomfortable. A lot of times you like to have the growth and it be comfortable and a smooth transition, but it's typically not like that. But it seems like you kind of definitely have that in store in terms of kind of planning for that phase of growth and maybe it being uncomfortable. But again, it's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Yes, and I mean, it's exciting and terrifying all at the same time. Everybody will tell you that, but at the end of the day, everybody will make it through whatever that next achievement level is. Again, it might leave you a little bruised, but you're going to learn from it too. So it's not a bad thing, but you do have to be comfortable being uncomfortable and being
Absolutely.
stressed and being a little panicked, but it all works itself out.
No, for sure. So let me maybe with the final two questions here, maybe number one, starting with uh just aspiring advice that you have for entrepreneurs. Again, we necessarily didn't get off into kind of your kind of upbringing, but it seems like you had to adapt a lot being a Navy maybe child. I think you call it a Navy brat on another platform. But what advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur who is kind of maybe thinking about kind of getting off into the entrepreneurship game? They have a product or they may have a service, and for one reason or another, they're kind of playing this double dutch. Like, okay, do I kind of get off into entrepreneurship? Do I not get off into entrepreneurship? Again, like I said, someone such as yourself who maybe had this kind of background where you had to adapt at different points in your upbringing, kind of stay creative and whatnot. What advice would you give to somebody who's considering entrepreneurship?
Really, I think it's just it's getting out there, right? You do not know what you do not know, and it is so hard to get that information, to get those data points unless you have experience or you have friends. So, you know, every community that you can go to pretty much has a small business office and a small business development center, a chamber of commerce, an organization in your niche, service, product, whatever it may be, and just get out there and go and talk to people. Because as humans, I feel we all want to help one another. And so if someone were to come with me with a question, I would be more than happy to help them, just like you helped, Dave, right? I mean, you mentioned the plant patent or trade dress. Those are more nuggets in that arsenal for someone to be a better entrepreneur.
Exactly.
But if you don't know that those questions are even out there, there's no way you're going to be able to be successful. So go to events, network, talk to people, and you will actually find those resources you didn't even know you needed. And more often than not, a lunch, a coffee, just a chat over the phone, you are going to help them and they are going to help you just purely by accident. So I think for me, the best thing is to get out there in your community, find those organizations and just start talking and just kind of learn as much as you can. And then Google is your friend too. But that, again, if you don't ask Google the right question, you're not going to get the right answer. So always ask your friends first.
No, and I love that. Again, you have to kind of get out there, put yourself out there, which can be uncomforting in and of itself. But if you're trying to learn and kind of get around people who have been doing it, you can kind of maybe try to rely on Google to a certain extent, but they're not maybe going to have all the answers, or you may be able to get there kind of sooner with kind of putting yourself out there in these spaces that or around people that are kind of doing what you kind of seek or want to do, which yeah, I definitely love that advice. And then I guess maybe the last question and maybe the most important question, how can people follow you? I'm not sure if you're big on social media, or how can people follow definitely Dry and Stride as well as purchase the product?
Well, thank you. Yes. So we have a website. It's www.dryandstride.com. We have a Facebook, our Instagram and our TikTok are dry.in.stride. So just a little period between each word to break it up. So we're on all of the platforms. I think we're not on X right now, and we're not really big on LinkedIn, but Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, our website. You can purchase the product on our website, on Amazon, on Walmart. And if it's okay with you, for your listeners, we're running a special. It's Pod 10. And so if you go onto our website, use the code Pod 10, you will save 10% on your order. And shipping is always free.
Wow, that's great. So POD 10 and you get 10% off.
That is correct.
Perfect. So is that, because again, like I was telling you maybe earlier, maybe a couple weeks before the podcast comes out, would that kind of still be running for maybe a little while, so that once it comes out, I can put it in the description so that people can still take advantage of it when the podcast come out? Is that so? Would that kind of discount.
We'll run it. We'll run it for all of 2025, Dave, because I'm sure, if people find your podcast like I did, you tend to go purge and you listen to a bunch of episodes, to get caught up, right? So even, we'll catch people that are listening now, but also catch the folks that might be listening in the future. And we'll be happy to run it for the rest of 2025. And, who knows, maybe they will have some other great ideas on other ways to use the dry and dry towel.
Oh, that's like I said, but I think, and I'm kind of a little younger, but I just think the days maybe are a little bit over where somebody works at a company for 30 years and then retires and retires off into the sunset. I think kind of these days with kind of the job market, I feel like everybody should be doing something for themselves, even if they're kind of still with their career or kind of what they're doing as a full-time job. At least have something else going on that kind of they enjoy or that they have a passion for. I think nothing is bad is going to necessarily come out of it. There'd be some uncomfortable moments at points, but again, you never know. Things can really take off, and kind of again, it could be different. And with the value of patents and trade dress and trademarks and all this stuff, we're talking about being able to kind of pass something down to your kids, to your grandkids that obviously we know you can't pass down. I guess your full time. I'm not passing down being an attorney to my daughter, but I could pass down a product or a business that I create and kind of work towards. So. Yeah, I'm always a big fan of kind of entrepreneurship and IP and protecting IP. So I definitely agree to, like you said, people finding out different uses of kind of dry and stride. It seems like they've already been doing that, and I would imagine that they find out more kind of new and cool uses for it outside of those that have already been identified. So I appreciate you coming on. The audience, hopefully you guys had your pens and your papers out. Sara, she came with a lot of jewels and a lot of things that she's kind of learned over the years. And again, a big point of this podcast is to be able to kind of take those nuggets and kind of expedite the process to the extent that it can be expedited, whether it's, hey, not having to maybe go through 3 attorneys, but kind of some things that you can look for early on, kind of help you kind of expedite kind of different parts of the process. Because it's going to be a long journey. To the extent that you can kind of cut out some fat, it's always helpful. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. And until the next one, you guys take care.